European. I speak as somebody involved in geopolitics, and I could say that we are in a world war, and this world war is different from all the other wars we have known, because it's a war that has many aspects. It has a military aspect, as you can see in Ukraine, and as you can see with the fact that China threatened Taiwan, but it's also an ideological war and an economical war, so it has many, many aspects. And economically speaking, I think that it involves mostly China. China wants to conquer the world in a different way. China wants to take advantage of the West, economically speaking, and I think that it was a big mistake to accept to have a free trade with China. You can accept to have free trade with free countries, but with a communist country, with a totalitarian country, it was obvious from the beginning that China would take advantage of the West. And so I think that many people have been blind about that, and now we are in an extremely bad situation. We are in an extremely bad situation because China has strong ties with many businesses in the United States and in Europe, and it will be very difficult to cut these ties now. And I think that the West has become dependent, economically speaking, of China, and that China will use that to destroy more and more freedoms in the West. And it would be necessary to find a way to stop China, but what makes it very difficult is what I just said, the fact that many businesses now depend on China to produce things, to trade with the rest of the world, and China is stealing intellectual property of many countries, and China doesn't create anything. China steals mostly, and China makes the rest of the world dependent. And I could say that if you look at the involvement of China in the World Health Organization, for example, you see that China can use this field too. I think that the pandemic was an accident in China, but China did hide what did happen, and China did its best to take advantage of the situation. I could say that all the countries who have decided lockdowns did it because it was done in China. And I think that it would be necessary to see what are the ties existing between China and many politicians in the West and big businesses in the West. Because I could say that the big lab who created vaccines made billions and billions of dollars. And I think that what did happen was extremely strange, because it was obvious, and now everybody knows it, that some drugs were good to cure people who had COVID. Hydroxychloroquine, for example, ivermectin, and immediately people said, no, these drugs are useless, they are extremely bad, you have to wait for the vaccines. And I think that the pandemic was used by China as a kind of biological war. China used it to make the rest of the world more dependent, and it worked. And
what are the possibilities that they may create future pandemics?
It's possible. It's possible, and it would be necessary to look very carefully at the ties between China and big lab, who, like Pfizer, for example. I think that you will find ties, and ties with people like Bill Gates too. So it's a very different war, and the only traditional war that you can see on the globe right now is the war in Ukraine. And I think that Putin didn't want this war. Putin thought that he could take Ukraine in 3 or 4 days. So you have a war, but it's a kind of accident. Now Putin is a kind of trap. He had no choice. He could not be defeated. If Putin accepts to be defeated, he will be toppled. He will not be president anymore. He will not be dictator anymore. So he has to fight. But it was an accident. Putin thought that he could take Ukraine in 3 to 4 days. That's it.
But isn't Russia now a threat for war against the U.S.?
No. Russia is unable to create a world war. Even now, I could say that the war is a disaster for Russia. Russia has lost many contracts. Russia is losing money. Russia is losing men. You have more than 200,000 Russians that have been killed. And many Russians decided to leave Russia. And they went elsewhere. 1 million people left the country. And so I think that Russia was declining, and I think that the decline will be quicker now. And I think that Russia is a threat for Europe. Was a threat for Europe. It can still be a threat for Europe, but it's not a threat for the rest of the world. The main threat is China.
But Russia now has, at the time of this recording, Russia has an alliance for resupplying from China.
No, I don't think that China will sell weapons to Russia. I think that Russia would love that. But China doesn't do it because China is dependent from the rest of the world. China depends on trade. And if you stop trading with China, or even if you cut partly trade with China, China will have huge problems. China has very big problems. Nobody speaks about it, but China is going old before it's going rich. China is still, in many parts of the country, an underdeveloped country, and the population is going down slowly but surely. And so I think that China wants to take advantage, economically speaking, of the rest of the world. That's what I said. But China will not give weapons to Russia. No, never. I don't think so. They will. It would be suicidal for them to do it. So Russia needs weapons coming from Iran, for example. That's it. Maybe North Korea. And what is dangerous is the Middle East. In the Middle East is Iran. And I must say that the Biden administration is creating a very bad situation in the Middle East. You see that the Middle East is changing. You see that the Biden administration spoke very badly to Saudi Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And you can see that seeing that the United States, the Biden administration didn't support him, he decided to go to Beijing and to sign a contract with Iran. And I could say that it changed many things in the Middle East. And I think that if Biden is not stopped, the Middle East will be Chinese and in the hand of Iran. And it creates a very bad situation for Israel. And I could say that what is happening in Israel is a kind of coup. They want to topple Netanyahu. They want to topple Netanyahu because Netanyahu knows that Iran is a danger. The Israeli left is blind. They don't want to see it. So the Biden administration wants to topple Benjamin Netanyahu right now. That's the reason why you had all these protests in Israel right now.
To prevent Israel from stopping the Iranian bomb.
Exactly. They don't want Israel to act against Iran. They want Iran to get the bomb, and they accept that Iran become the main power in the Middle East, and that China take advantage of this situation.
Isn't that a betrayal from Washington of Israel, who they pledge?
Yes, it's a betrayal. But I could say that the Democratic Party now is not what it was 20 years ago. Now it's a leftist party with anti-Semite people like Ilhan Omar, for example, and people like Ilhan Omar would not have been accepted in the Democratic Party 20 years ago. Now they are perfectly fine with this kind of people. So the Democratic Party is now an enemy of Israel.